Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Nicole Kristoff. I'm the Deputy Director at Crimestoppers of Houston. I'm joined today by active members of the Harris County Animal Cruelty Task Force, including Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, Harris County Precinct 5 Animal Crimes Unit Sergeant Charles Jansen, Harris County District Attorney's Office Animal Cruelty Section Chief Jessica Milligan, Bark Animal Enforcement Officer Randy Farmer, Houston Pet Set Co-Presidents Tina Faust and Tama Lundquist. We also have Charlotte with the Red Collar Rescue. At Crimestoppers of Houston, we're committed to helping our law enforcement partners solve serious felony crimes that are happening in our city. We are here to ask for your help today in identifying the suspect or suspects responsible for the horrific case of animal cruelty and recent death of a dog who was found this past Sunday with an arrow in his back. You will hear specifics about that case momentarily. Crimestoppers of Houston is announcing an increased reward of up to $7,500 for information that leads to the identification and or arrest of the suspect or suspects in this case. Task Force member Houston Pet Set has contributed to this reward to make this possible, and we thank them for their commitment and dedication in helping bring justice for this animal. Once again, Crimestoppers of Houston is offering an increased reward of $7,500 for information that leads to the identification and or arrest of suspects in this case. As a reminder, if you know something or saw something, we urge you to report it. You can do so anonymously by calling Crimestoppers at 713-222-TIPS. We will never ask your name, phone number, address, or any other information that could identify you. We do not record phone calls, we do not have caller ID, and no one will know you called unless you tell them. There are 3 ways that you can report crimes to Crimestoppers: our tip line, 713-222-TIPS, our mobile app, and our website, crime-stoppers.org. I'm now going to turn it over to Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, followed by Precinct 5, and then the District Attorney's Office.
Thank you. I'm here today to support the work of this task force. I'll mention that this was started with the vision and leadership of Constable Heap from Precinct 5, and the task force itself is led by Sergeant Jansen that's here today. And we also have a deputy that's assigned here, Deputy Curtis with the Harris County Sheriff's Office. And I want to thank Crimestoppers for hosting this event today. And we're here to seek the public's help in identifying a particularly dangerous and twisted individual. That's the only way to describe someone who would aim a bow and arrow at a defenseless dog, draw back the string, and launch an arrow into someone's pet. And that's what someone did a few days ago, mortally wounding an innocent dog, leaving it to suffer a slow and painful death. It was a sadistic act of violence, possibly committed by a deeply disturbed individual who likely poses a continued threat to our community. In Harris County, we have no tolerance for animal abusers. That's why we all joined here back in February to announce the launch of Precinct 5 Constable Ted Heap's Animal Cruelty Task Force. We know that people who abuse animals are much more likely to harm people. It is vital that we identify the person responsible for this act of animal cruelty and that justice is served. On a final note, this is National Adopt a Shelter Dog Month. The Sheriff's Office is partnering with the Harris County Animal Shelter to encourage folks to consider welcoming an abandoned dog into their family. You can see these dogs featured in our Harris County Sheriff's Office Facebook page. Sadly, we are too late to save the dog that was killed in this case that brought us here today, but we can honor its memory by adopting. Thank you very much.
My name is Sergeant Charles Jansen with Precinct 5 Constable Ted Heap's office. I'm currently assigned to the Animal Crimes Unit. Precinct 5, along with Harris County Sheriff's Office, are among the member agencies involved with the Harris County Animal Cruelty Task Force. The Harris County Animal Cruelty Task Force is a collaborative group of private and governmental agencies who respond and investigate specific cases of animal abuse in Harris County. On Sunday, September 30th, at approximately 5 p.m., a dog was located shot by an unknown subject or subjects with an arrow. The dog was located in the vicinity of Tidwell and Homestead. The dog was taken into custody by the City of Houston Animal Control, who began providing the dog with life-sustaining medical care. With the assistance of Red Collar Rescue, the dog was transferred to Texas A&M for advanced medical care. During the course of the dog's second surgery, the dog passed away despite extensive efforts of the medical teams. We are asking anyone with information on this case to please call Crimestoppers of Houston, 713-222-TIPS. Additionally, we ask the public, if they suspect an animal is being abused, to file a report with the Harris County Animal Cruelty Task Force at www.927paws.org. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Milligan. I'm an Assistant District Attorney and the Animal Cruelty Section Chief for the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Before we get started, all of you with the media here today, thank you for coming to hear about the facts of this case and to help us spread the word on what the task force needs going forward in this investigation. I know your main questions always revolve around what the punishment range for this type of crime would be. At this point, we believe it's an intentional crime, and the punishment range would be 2 years to 10 years in prison, possible fine or a combination of the two, or potential probation if the offender is probation eligible, although that's not something that the state would seek at this point. To Red Collar Rescue, to BARK, to those involved in Friends of BARK, and the medical staff at both Virgie and A&M where this animal was treated, I also wanted to say a special thank you to them for all the financial resources that they spent towards this animal, for their medical expertise, and especially for the compassion that they gave to this animal in his final moments of life. To the public, barely a week ago, we came into this very room to talk about the task force, to talk about what we were created for, how far we've come, and also what we needed from the public. And when we were preparing for that press conference, one of the things we talked about was bringing a live animal to that press conference to show the public what we do. We decided against that because we wanted to keep it focused on the process. And yet, a week later, we have a live case coming to our attention, and we're here to ask you for the assistance that we discussed last week. You've heard the facts, you've heard the severity of this case and how someone intentionally shot this dog with an animal, but sadly there are still some pieces that are missing that the public can help with. The address was the 900 block of Sheaves Drive. This is in the northeast side of town, around Tidwell and Homestead. Some of you live on that street, some of you live in that neighborhood, and certainly some of you live in that area. So you might know this dog as you look at pictures that the media is posting. You may not think that what you know about this dog is important, but you certainly might know small details like where it lived, who it lived with, its history, perhaps where it came from, who fed it, who walked it, who may have been playing with that dog right before this incident. Or on the flip side, you might know information about who might have abandoned it, who frequently bullied it, who was annoyed by this animal, perhaps where it begged for food, or who was trying to get rid of it. Any small detail that you have about this dog could lead to something big for us and give us some sort of beginning to determine where this dog came from and who might have had some sort of a motive to hurt it. So who hurt this dog? That's obviously the biggest reason that we're here, to figure out who hurt this dog. And people talk. They talk to each other, especially over social media these days, and they brag about the things that they do in person or on Twitter, on Facebook. This is an unusual circumstance. In Harris County, I have never prosecuted anyone for shooting a dog with an arrow, a high-powered hunting bow and arrow. So if you hear somebody talking about something similar to a dog being shot with an arrow, you can bet they're talking about this case, because this is not something we see every day, and this is not something that we take lightly. And when you hear about it, you might feel hesitation or reservation about reporting it, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't feel scared. You shouldn't feel like you're ratting somebody out, because just like Sheriff Gonzalez said, the people that do these kinds of things to animals are a danger to the community. To share some statistics to make you feel better about reporting this if you know who did this act. Think about all the school shooters that we have and some of the mass murders. People that go into our community schools, our malls, our concerts, our movie theaters, and our churches. They have a history of animal cruelty. They all do. Our serial killers, once they're looked at more closely after they've been caught and convicted, you look at them and they all started on animals. So sadly, even more research tells us that somebody in the history of these people knew that they were experimenting on animals. They knew about how they were abusing animals, and they just never came forward. You don't want that to be you. If you know the person that hurt this animal, do not be afraid to report it. Because reporting this incident, reporting what you know about the person who hurt this animal, may actually allow you to save many other innocent people and children in our community. To the person out there who shot Archer with an arrow, I know it's bold to talk to you. We don't typically do that in press conferences, but I want to address you specifically. I'm a prosecutor, and it is my job to look at all the evidence that law enforcement brings to me, to make sure that they have a case, that they have probable cause, and that they have evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person committed an offense. That's what this task force behind me is doing. They're collecting that evidence on you. But as a prosecutor, I also know that there are two sides to every story, and I listen to those stories. For now, we see this as a violent crime. Somebody intentionally hurt this animal. But if there is another side of this story that you want to share, now is the time to do it. The longer you wait, the longer it takes for you to reach out about what happened to this dog, the less the task force, the DA's office, and a jury of your peers is going to believe that what happened to this dog was justifiable, was defensible, or perhaps accidental. Now is the time to go forward with the information that you know, or whatever happened out there, because the longer it takes, the more we will continue to believe that this was an intentional act of cruelty, and the more likely we are to seek the higher end of that punishment range that we talked about a moment ago. The citizens of Harris County care about each other, and they care about their pets, and I care about protecting them. So does this task force. Please come forward, talk about what you did, and allow us to pursue this and look at the evidence as a whole.
Open it up for any questions. Can someone describe the injuries to the dog and how he was impacted by the...
Hello, I'm Charlotte Liberta with Red Collar Rescue, and yes, we can describe the injuries. When we were notified of this situation, we immediately took the dog, who we named Archer. We took him to Vergy, which is a local animal ER. They immediately did x-rays and determined that the arrow had gone in through the neck, through the thorax, the diaphragm, the abdomen, and located into his liver. They knew of the severity of the case. He was critical at the time. They suggested that the best option to save his life was to take him immediately to Texas A&M. So one of our volunteers drove him to A&M, got there about midnight on Sunday night. They stabilized him overnight. First thing the next morning, they did a CT scan to confirm again exactly where the arrow was located. From there, they took him immediately into surgery. The arrow was made out of fiberglass, so there was no way that they could cut the arrow into individual pieces because it would have shattered, further damaging his organs. So they had to open up the chest cavity and little by little remove the arrow. He made it through having the arrow removed, but then he immediately went into respiratory distress. He started filling up with blood, and he was having problems breathing. So they immediately closed the chest, brought him out of anesthesia, started giving him blood transfusions, oxygen, and suctioning the air that was coming out. Basically, air was coming into the abdomen, and they didn't know where it was coming from. So we got him stable. After several hours, there was no choice but to go back in and do a second surgery to try to fix the area where the air was coming from. It either was the trachea or the lungs had been damaged by the arrow. So they went in late Monday evening, performed a second surgery, and unfortunately during the second surgery, Archer went into respiratory distress, had cardiac arrest, and passed away. We're devastated. There's no words to describe how we all feel at this moment. The pain, the anger, the grief over losing such an innocent animal. There's no excuse for this. Any further questions?
Archer is a reference to who you shot with the bow and arrow?
We gave him a name when he came into bark. Bark has to give every animal a name and an ID number, and so we named him Archer. He did not have a name at the time. He was just given the name Archer.
Describe the dog when it showed up to that person's house, because someone found him, right? Did he walk into someone's yard? Was he walking, or was he found in an alley laying down? Describe him at that time.
I'm going to let the police officers address that issue. We were not present when the dog, as far as I know, the dog walked into someone's yard.
May I My name is Deputy Curtis. I'm with the Harris County Sheriff's Department Animal Crimes Unit. I'm also a member of the task force. For what we've gathered so far is a individual that lives in the neighborhood walked out and basically noticed the dog on her front porch. She observed the arrow in it and immediately called the Houston Police Department.
So what makes you believe, how do you rule out that it was an accident? People who have done archery before say that it's really hard to control an arrow you're starting out. Do we know that somebody might have been out there practicing and just misfired? Or how do you know this was a criminal act?
At this time, we don't understand. We don't know the answer.
Did the dog have a collar on at the time?
Yes.
Okay, so just a collar, no identifying, address or phone number or anything like that?
No, it's being investigated at this time, ma'am.
So you think that this dog did belong to somebody? Was
Yes,
it
ma'am.
a stray? Okay.
Have you recovered any surveillance video from the neighborhood?
Not this time, ma'am.
So will there be some type of reward for someone calling in to Crimestoppers?
Ma'am.
Yes, the reward on this particular case regarding this animal cruelty case is up to $7,500 for information that leads to the identification and/or arrest of any suspect involved in this case.
How difficult is it to prosecute these kinds of cases involving animal cruelty?
If you have the evidence you need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone committed an offense, it was intentional, knowingly, or recklessly even under the statute, it's not difficult because you should have that evidence before you go forward in prosecution anyway.
And how important is it to get tips from Crimestoppers or anywhere else in order to help with that process?
That's the purpose. That's the purpose of us being here today, is to encourage those tips. People are fearful, obviously, because if someone does this to an animal, they're thinking, this could happen to me, this could happen to my family, someone could retaliate. So obviously that's the difficult thing, is getting the community involved, which is why we were here last week. That's why we're here today. So we want the community to be part of this task force and to help this process work.
And I think this question's for Charlotte. Charlotte, how big of a fighter was this little guy? Because he obviously made it to someone's porch.
Yes.
He made it all the way to A&M with an arrow in his back. Just how...
Amazing what animals, how resilient they can be and how they do not show pain and how they can love humans even when they've been so abused. You can't really tell by the pictures, but he was a small dog. He was only 24 pounds and about a year old. So he was a little guy. When we were transporting him to A&M, he originally started off laying in the back seat of the volunteer's car. And even with the arrow in his back, he crawled into the front seat, laid next to her, and put his paw on her. So he was amazing. Not a mean bone in his body, just a sweetheart.
And then for you guys, how important is it to get this little guy justice?
Absolutely 100% we want justice for this dog. Sadly, we've been through other cases like this, and we will do everything possible to help bring this person to justice, to prosecute him and get justice for Little Archer.
What kind of dog was he?
A little mixed mutt. Little brown dog, probably a little lab mix. He was tiny. Like I said, 24 pounds and full grown, so kind of like a little mini lab.
Again, we thank you very much for coming today. Anyone with information, please call Crimestoppers 713-222-TIPS. All callers remain anonymous. Thank you.